Greetings. Now, in this book review series, I'm going to review a book that is not really considered a book about futurism because it only talks about the past. However, I do consider it a foundational textbook in terms of learning about the megatrends that are part of our world, because to understand the past progress makes prediction about the future easier, especially when many megatrends can be seen in combination. So this book, which is How We Got to Now by Stephen Johnson, is quite a good book in that it's an easy read and it has a lot of visual imagery to assist in the process of becoming more familiar with all of the trends associated with technological progress that created the modern world. Now, his table of contents simplifies things down to 6 different concepts, and how the harnessing of these 6 simple concepts created all the productization and infrastructure advancement that enabled the modern world to exist. So the 6 chapters are glass, cold, sound, clean, time, and light. 6 simple one-word chapter headings. What do each of those mean? Like, for example, with time, how time was measured, how people created a calendar, how having uniform time measurement enabled the creation of a train system, because before that things could be 15 minutes off, so nobody knew how to get to their train or not. And this caused greater productivity throughout everything that the modern world was built on. Another one was cleanliness, and how the recognition of what causes infections and the spread of disease did not occur until very late. In the second half of the 19th century, doctors did not wash their hands before performing surgery, and ones that suspected that they should wash their hands before performing surgery were laughed at by other doctors. Even the President of the United States, James A. Garfield, was shot in 1881, and he died because of the poor sanitary conditions of surgeons and other medical professionals at that time. And this wasn't that long ago, 1881. He was the 20th President of the United States. His wound would not have been fatal at all under modern medicine and modern standards of sanitization and sterilization. He died because he lived at a time when doctors did not even wash their hands before putting their hands into a patient for surgery. That sounds ridiculous, but that is in fact true, and was true not very long ago. There are a lot of interesting stories in this book about how Chicago as a city, downtown Chicago, was raised up to a higher level so that an underground sewage system could be installed underneath. Entire city blocks weighing thousands of tons were lifted up to a higher elevation. And this was done a long time ago, 160 years ago, in the 1850s and 60s. That is an impressive feat of civil engineering, to raise an entire city block by block up to a higher level to create a sanitation system underneath. And there are many cities in the world, in emerging market countries, that could benefit by that same practice that Chicago did in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s. So the story about how that came to be was very interesting. Another interesting story in this book was the ice trade. Before we had freezers, people in tropical countries had never seen ice, let alone had any utility for it. So a business formed about taking ice from frozen lakes that existed in New Hampshire or in Canada or places like that, and cutting out blocks of ice from the frozen lake and then wrapping that ice up into insulation so that it would not melt, and then shipping that ice down to places like Florida or the Caribbean islands, where people would buy that ice in order to have cold drinks. Blocks of ice were shipped from Boston all the way to Calcutta, India in some cases. That is 10,000 miles. And this seems strange to us today, that this was happening 150, 170 years ago. Blocks of ice were cut up, wrapped up in insulation. 20% of it might melt along the way, but 80% was preserved to the end point of final user sale. And people purchased blocks of ice. But since we did not have freezers at that time, that was the only way anyone could get ice in those tropical areas. And before ice was being sold into those tropical areas, the first time, people did not even know what to do with that ice. When someone first had the idea of taking ice from Boston down to the Caribbean, people in the Caribbean did not know why they would want such a thing. It had to be marketed to them about how this is how you can stay cold and keep your drinks cold and all that in very hot weather. Now this leads us to think about similar instances that still exist in our world today. As strange as we find it to send blocks of ice thousands of miles to sell them, people in the future we'll see what we do today to be equally strange, which is that hydrocarbon fuel is shipped thousands of miles away. Oil from the Persian Gulf was shipped all the way to the Western Hemisphere, Houston, Texas, before the United States had our shale fracking revolution and we no longer need oil from the Middle East. But oil from the Persian Gulf is still shipped to Europe and to East Asia. Shipping any hydrocarbon fuel thousands of miles is going to be seen in the future as something just as funny as we find the concept of shipping blocks of ice thousands of miles was in 1880 or so, because energy is going to be far more decentralized and localized due to the spread of solar energy, wind energy, electric vehicles, and so forth. And the notion of shipping hydrocarbon fuel thousands of miles will be seen by people in the very near future as having been quite a ridiculous practice from a bygone age. And this book has also been modified into a television documentary series on PBS and other broadcasting services. And if you're interested in the subject matter of this book, you may want to look for that documentary as well. I'm also going to see if I can get Stephen Johnson on this channel as a guest speaker so that I can interview him just like I did interviews with other luminaries in the past. But overall, if you want to understand how past engineering of simple concepts has created many of the processes and products and functionality of the modern world, as a basis from which to then predict what our near future could be like, this is an essential book, so I highly recommend it. How We Got to Now by Stephen Johnson. Now, if you like this type of content, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel, and thank you very much for watching.